Captain Marlowe stepped from the shuttle into a wide chamber filled with soft, amber light. The walls curved upward like the inside of a shell, smooth and pale. He felt the weight of many eyes upon him, though the room felt nearly empty. Two silent figures in long robes stood at the far end, their faces hidden beneath hoods. A steady hum of air vents was the only sound. He moved forward, boots clicking on the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone and flowers. Past tall, slender columns of woven metal, he saw a raised platform bathed in a gentle glow. It held a single person, Arya, the youngest breeding candidate of the sector. She stood very still, hands folded in front of her, head bowed. Her dark hair was tied back, and her simple gown fell to her ankles. Every eye in the chamber followed her small form. Marlowe hesitated near the columns. He had traveled across 3-star lanes to reach Velaris, a world famous for its genetic traditions. This rite was old as memory, a ritual meant to secure the future of Arya's people. He had been told only that he was her prize, chosen from among the Council's many envoys. He was not sure what that meant, but he sensed it carried honor and duty. As he approached, the robed figures moved aside without a word. Marlowe's heart beat faster. He recalled the Council's message, to stand with Arya until the rite was complete, then return together to his homeworld. He wondered what world that would be, and what awaited him afterward. Arya raised her head. Her eyes were wide and dark like onyx under the soft lights. Her face was gentle, but she looked frightened. She was barely older than a child by human years. Marlowe felt a surge of protectiveness. He found himself wanting to ease her fear, to tell her it would be all right. But tradition demanded silence until the rite began. The first hooded figure stepped forward and spoke in a clear, musical voice. "Captain Marlowe of the Starlight Envoy," she said, each word precise. "You are now in the presence of Arya, of Velaris, the chosen linebearer of our people. You have been honored with the rite of pledge. Witness and uphold it." Marlowe inclined his head. His voice echoed softly in the chamber. "I accept," he said. His own language sounded strange in his ears, but he spoke slowly so his words would carry. Arya watched him with uncertain hope shining in her eyes. The second figure produced a golden bowl on a low stand. Inside, petals floated on clear water that glowed faintly. "This water binds the pledge," the figure said. "Drink it together, to seal the bond." Arya's tutor, a gentle woman named Salis, stepped beside the bowl. She lifted Arya's small hand and guided it to the bowl's edge. Marlowe knelt and placed his hand lightly on Arya's. They both dipped their fingers into the water. It was cool and tingled like distant starlight. Arya flinched but did not pull away. Marlowe smiled to reassure her, and she offered a small nod. They touched their fingers to their lips in unison. The water's glow brightened, then faded. The chamber's hum deepened, and shafts of light shifted around them. Marlowe felt a subtle vibration under his boots, as if the world itself acknowledged the pledge. Arya looked up at him, her face calm now. He met her gaze with a steady smile. In that instant he forgot the long journey, the Council's expectations, even his own fear. There was only Arya, standing beside him in a moment of shared trust. When they rose, the hooded figures retreated to the shadows. The columns dimmed, and a distant chime signaled the rite's end. No cheering followed. This was not a celebration, but a solemn covenant. Arya's tutor guided her forward, and Marlowe followed. They walked through a side hallway lit by lanterns shaped like blossoming vines. Arya's small hand slipped into Marlowe's. He offered his arm, and she accepted with a shy smile. Outside, the terrace overlooked a garden of silver trees and glowing ponds. 2 moons hung low in the violet sky. Arya drew a deep breath, as though tasting freedom. Marlowe kept his gaze on her, proud and protective. "Thank you," Arya whispered. Her voice was soft but clear, "for being brave with me." Marlowe bowed his head. "Thank you," he replied, "for trusting me." As they walked toward the waiting ship, Marlowe wondered what trials lay ahead, but he felt ready. Arya's hand in his was a promise of something new, a future neither had fully imagined, born from an ancient rite but guided by their own choice. In the hush of Velaris's night, Two souls took their first steps together into an uncertain but hopeful tomorrow. Arya woke before dawn, the violet sky still dark above Velaris. She dressed in simple robes Celis had laid out, their soft fabric. Brushing her skin, she peered outside the cabin window of the envoy's ship. Mist clung to the gardens below, and the silver trees looked like silent sentinels. Captain Marlowe moved quietly in the berth across the room. He noticed Arya's gaze and offered a gentle nod. She smiled and stepped outside into the corridor, where the hush of early morning greeted her like a gentle promise. They walked together down the ship's polished deck, their footsteps soft on the metal floor. Arya's small hand found Marlowe's, and he raised it to his lips, a knightly gesture. That made her laugh. The sound echoed in the empty hall, warm and bright. Outside the viewport, the two moons hovered low over the sea of lights in the city. The air smelled of salt and flowers. Arya leaned close to Marlowe, her voice a soft whisper. "I want to see the city before the council calls us again," she said. Marlowe nodded and led her through the cargo bay, where crates of diplomatic gifts waited for the council. Celis joined them, her eyes thoughtful. She carried a small satchel of coins. "We have time before our next audience," she said. "The council does not expect us until mid-morning." Arya's eyes lit up. She skipped ahead, her robe swirling like dark petals. They emerged onto the city streets, where lanterns glowed on low stone walls. Citizens of Velaris moved around them, silent in their ritual garments of gray and silver. Some glanced at Arya with respect, bowing low. Others watched Marlowe curiously, murmuring in their soft language. Arya introduced Marlowe and Celis to a street vendor who sold sweet fruit from distant worlds. She offered a half of ripe amber melon to Marlowe. He took a bite, juice dripping down his chin. Arya giggled and wiped it away with a leaf from a nearby plant. As they wandered deeper into the city, Arya pointed out places she had loved as a child, the library of living blooms where books floating on air released gentle perfumes, the fountain of echoing wishes where whispered hopes danced on the water's surface. Marlowe listened, amazed by her world. He asked questions about her life, her dreams beyond the right. Arya spoke of her wish to travel among the stars, to learn the music of distant suns. Marlowe felt a kinship in her words, a shared longing he had never spoken aloud. Around midday, Celis guided them toward the council hall. Its walls rose like crystal towers, sharp and clear in the bright sun. Arya's steps slowed as they approached. Her face was quiet, a smooth mask of calm. Marlowe slipped his arm around her. "You are brave," he whispered. Arya looked at him, her dark eyes shining. "So are you," she replied. Together, they stepped through the grand doors into the echoing chamber. Inside, the council waited. On a raised dais of white stone, the elders sat in a semicircle, their robes shimmering. They watched Arya and Marlowe with unreadable expressions. The eldest spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Today we begin the next trials," she announced. Arya drew a steady breath. She placed her hand in Marlowe's, and he squeezed back. The first trial would test Arya's resolve and Marlowe's loyalty. Outside the hall, a small group of rebels gathered, ready to help if needed. Arya's heart knocked in her chest, but she felt strength in Marlowe's steady presence. As the trial began, Arya and Marlowe took their positions on the marble floor. The light in the chamber dimmed, and symbols glowed on the walls. Each symbol represented a virtue of their people: honor, courage, wisdom, compassion, and change. Arya would face each test in turn, guided by Marlowe's support. She lifted her chin and met the council's gaze. Marlowe stepped beside her, determined. Together they would face the trials of tradition, forging a path toward a future defined by choice and trust. Arya stood in the center of the marble chamber, the floor cool beneath her bare feet. Soft light glowed from the symbols on the walls. Captain Marlowe stood quietly at her side. Arya's first trial was of honor. She felt her heart flutter, but she lifted her chin and met the council's gaze. The eldest counselor spoke. "Arya of Velaris, you must prove your honor by facing the mirror of truth. Step forward and speak without fear." A pane of glass slid from the wall, revealing an empty space. Arya stepped toward it with Marlowe beside her. When she looked into the mirror, she saw herself reflected, but behind her stood a shadowy figure. Arya inhaled, steadying her breath. The shadow spoke in her own voice. "You betrayed your friend to save yourself," it whispered. Arya shook her head. She remembered a childhood moment when she had chosen safety over honesty. Her cheeks warmed with shame. Marlowe's hand found hers, and he gave it a gentle squeeze. Arya cleared her throat. She spoke to the mirror. "I was afraid," she said. Her voice trembled but grew stronger. "I made a mistake, and I will learn from it." The shadow wavered, then evaporated. Like mist, the glass turned opaque, and the council's symbol of honor glowed bright. Arya felt relief and pride wash over her. She had faced her truth. Next, the symbol of courage illuminated. Arya and Marlowe moved to the second circle on the floor. A low hum filled the chamber as a door opened to a narrow corridor. Inside, flickering lights revealed obstacles, a swinging beam, a low ceiling, and shifting steps. Arya glanced at Marlowe. He nodded. Together, they entered the corridor. The swinging beam lashed out like a pendulum. Arya dipped under its arc, her robes brushing the floor. Marlowe followed, steadying her when she stumbled. At the low ceiling, Arya crouched and crawled. Marlowe paused to help her stand when the ceiling ended. They reached the shifting steps, which moved beneath their feet. Arya felt panic rise, but Marlowe spoke softly. "Trust yourself," he said. Arya nodded and stepped carefully. Each footfall found solid ground. When they reached the end, the corridor closed behind them with a soft click. The chamber's light shifted to the symbol of courage, pulsing once. Arya's chest heaved as she breathed deeply. She had faced her fears with Marlowe at her side. He offered his arm, and she smiled gratefully. The third trial was of wisdom. Arya and Marlowe returned to the center. A circle of stones floated in. The air, each etched with a symbol, the counselor spoke. "Solve the puzzle of the runes. Align the stones so their symbols tell our history." Arya studied the stones. Some showed trees, some moons, some waves. She recalled the lessons Celis had taught her about their people's past. Arya reached for a stone with a wave symbol. She placed it next to one with a tree. Marlowe watched and offered quiet guidance. Arya thought of how her world had grown from forests at the sea's edge. She moved another stone with a moon. The sequence told the tale: growth, night, water, life. When she finished, the stones glowed and snapped into place. The symbol of wisdom lit up. Arya felt warmth in her mind, a sense of rightness. She looked at Marlowe, and he gave her a proud smile. She realized that her knowledge was strong, that she could carry her people's history forward. The chamber dimmed around them. Arya felt the trials press on her spirit, but she stood tall. She and Marlowe had passed 3 tests with honor, courage, and wisdom. Only compassion and change remained. She wondered how the trials of feeling and of new ideas would test her. As they stepped aside, the 4th symbol glowed softly: compassion. The counselor's voice filled the room. "Arya, you must show true compassion. Aid one in suffering." A section of wall slid away, revealing a small alcove. Inside lay a wounded animal, its iridescent skin torn and bleeding. Arya gasped. The creature whimpered. Arya knelt beside it, heart pounding. She recalled her mother's lessons about healing and kindness. Marlowe stood behind her. Arya reached out, stroking the creature's head. She felt its tremble. Gently, she tore a strip of cloth from her robe and pressed it to the wound. She spoke softly, whispering words of comfort in her own tongue. The creature's breathing eased. Its eyes met Arya's, and Arya felt a deep bond form. The beast's pain was still there, but it trusted her. Marlowe produced a small vial of healing salve from Celis's satchel. Arya applied it carefully. The creature closed its eyes as relief washed over it. The chamber brightened as the symbol of compassion glowed gold. Arya rose, brushing dust from her robes. She looked at Marlowe, tears of joy in her eyes. He bowed his head in respect. Arya realized that compassion was not weakness, but a bridge between beings. She felt stronger for it. The last symbol, change, shimmered pale blue. Arya took Marlowe's hand. They faced the council's elders together. Arya felt the weight of tradition and the promise of a new future. The chamber held its breath, waiting for her final act. Arya drew a steady breath. She was ready to shape tomorrow. Arya took a steady breath as the pale blue light of change filled the chamber. Captain Marlowe stood close at her side, his hand warm against hers. The elders watched from their high seats, their faces unreadable. Arya knew this final trial would decide her fate and the future of Velaris. A low hum sounded as a hidden door slid open. Beyond it lay a rotunda of living vines, their leaves silver and soft. At its center stood a stone pedestal with a block of uncarved crystal. Salus, Arya's tutor, whispered that she must reshape the crystal to show her vision of a new tradition. Arya's heart fluttered. She remembered the old stories. Those who failed this trial were returned to their families in shame. She thought of her people, bound by rights that gave them strength but left no room for their own voices. She recalled her time with Marlowe, his kindness, his gentle questions. She saw a future where choice and respect walked together. She stepped forward and placed her hands on the crystal. It was cool and smooth like frozen water. Closing her eyes, Arya pictured the vine chamber outside a place where life and change were parts of the same cycle. She felt a warmth in her chest as her fingers pressed into the crystal's surface. The stone yielded, carving itself under her will. Lines appeared, a circle of vines entwined with a star, symbolizing unity between old and new. As the image formed, the vines in the rotunda stirred and glowed softly. Arya opened her eyes. The crystal pulsed with light, reflecting her design. The chamber fell silent. The eldest counselor rose. Her robe whispered as she moved. She studied the crystal, then looked at Arya. "You have shown change not as destruction, but as renewal," she said. Her voice echoed. "You honor our past and guide us forward." The elders nodded in agreement. The pale blue light brightened until it filled the room. Arya felt a gentle warmth wash over her. Marlowe squeezed her hand. Arya realized she had passed the trial. Outside the hall, citizens waited in hushed groups. The council's guards stood ready, unsure of what would follow. Arya and Marlowe walked through the grand doors onto the terrace. 2 moons shone over the silver gardens. Arya raised her voice, steady and clear. "Today," she began, "we pledge to keep our traditions alive while we give each person the right to choose their path." Her words rang through the night air. The crowd stirred, hope shining in their eyes. Marlowe stood beside her, proud and strong. As the terraces filled with soft applause, Salus joined them with the secret faction's leader, a young noble who had worked in silence for change. Arya smiled at them both. She knew the real work had just begun. Together they would build a new future for Velaris, one rooted in tradition, but blossoming with the power of choice. Arya watched the first light of Velaris dawn creep across the silver gardens. Petals of pale flowers opened in slow rhythm, as if celebrating the new promise born last night. She stood beside Captain Marlowe on the terrace, their hands still lightly touching. The soft glow of 2 moons had faded, but their memory lingered in Arya's heart. Below them, the city awoke. Citizens moved through lantern-lit streets, carrying baskets of fresh fruit and bundles of woven reeds. Some paused to smile at Arya as she passed. Others gave Marlowe nods of respect. Arya felt a warm pride bloom inside her. The trials were over, but her work was only beginning. Salus met them at the foot of the steps. Her eyes were bright with hope. "The council has agreed to your words," she said, voice gentle. "They will draft a new charter to include voluntary rights. They ask for your help." Arya nodded. She remembered the words she had spoken last night, the clear promise of choice and tradition united. Now those words must become real. Marlowe offered Arya his arm, and she took it. They walked toward the council hall together. Along the way, they met members of the secret faction who had supported her in silence. A young diplomat named Kale offered a stack of parchments. "These are proposals from the people," he said. "They show what they want: small ceremonies for families, New laws for consent and ways to honor our line without forced bonds. Arya held the parchment steady in her hands. The words were simple: respect, freedom, unity. She felt a surge of gratitude for every citizen who had dared to dream of change. Inside the hall, the air was cool and still. Elders sat around the crystal table, their robes the color of dawn. The eldest counselor motioned to Arya. "We value your vision, linebearer," she said. "We will begin debate today." "Speak freely." Arya took a deep breath. She remembered the trials: honor, courage, wisdom, compassion, change. She had learned that courage was the quiet choice to speak truth. Now she spoke. "Our past has given us strength. Our families have thrived under our rights for generations. But when a custom binds a person without their heart, it becomes a burden. We can build new ways to honor our bloodlines while giving each candidate the right to choose. The rights should be gifts, not chains." Her voice was calm, each word clear. Marlowe watched from the side, his presence a steady support. The eldest nodded slowly. Another elder, a stern woman named Irina, frowned. "Some traditions cannot be changed," Irina said. "We risk losing what makes us strong." Arya met Irina's gaze. "Strength comes from unity, not fear," she replied softly. "United by choice, our people will stand taller than before." Debate swirled around the table like the wind in a storm. Voices rose and fell. Arya felt her heart pound, but she held to her calm. Marlowe spoke once, adding how he had seen the beauty of Valeris's culture and how it shone brightest when offered freely. His words carried the weight of another world's respect. After many hours, the council agreed to form a committee. Arya, Celis, Kale, and 2 elders would draft the new charter. The hall emptied, leaving sunlight to dance on the crystal table. Arya gathered her parchments. Marlowe touched her shoulder. "Rest now," he said. Arya shook her head, smiling. "There is work to do." They left the hall and stepped into the busy plaza. Stalls lined the walkways, offering fruits that tasted of moonlight and fabrics woven from silver fibers. Arya paused at a stall where an elderly woman sold small pendants shaped like vines. The woman offered Arya a gift, a tiny silver leaf on a chain. "For hope," she said. Arya accepted, tears in her eyes. She clasped the chain around her neck. Marlowe watched her with a gentle smile. "It suits you," he said. Arya looked down at the leaf. She felt its cool weight, a promise to her people and to herself. As they walked toward the gardens, Arya thought of the weeks ahead. The committee would work through drafts and edits, listening to voices from every corner of Valeris. Some would fear change. Others would embrace it. Arya would need to draw on the lessons of her trials: compassion for those in pain, honor for those who valued tradition, courage to stand firm, and wisdom to guide her people. In the silver gardens, Arya knelt by a glowing pond. The water shimmered with hidden light. She saw her reflection alongside Marlowe's. She reached out and touched the surface. Ripples spread, distorting both images into one. Arya smiled at the unity it showed. She whispered a vow: "I will honor our past, shape our future, and protect every choice." Marlowe rested a hand on her shoulder. "We will do it together," he said. Arya rose. Together they walked into the sunrise, ready to forge a new tradition that would bind their people not with duty alone, but with the free will of every heart. Arya entered the council chamber before dawn, the air cool and silent. Captain Marlowe followed behind, carrying a bundle of scrolls. Today the committee would meet for the first time. The room's crystal table gleamed in the torchlight. Elders. Irina and Dasil sat opposite Arya and Celis with Kale beside them. Arya felt a tremor of nerves, but she pressed her palms together and drew a steady breath. Celis unrolled the first parchment. "This draft outlines voluntary rights, consent declarations, and family-led gatherings," she explained softly. Irina frowned. "We replace our sacred ceremony with a simple gathering?" she asked. Arya answered with calm resolve. "We honor the right spirit. We give choice back to every candidate. That choice makes our rituals stronger." Dasil tapped his fingers on the table. "Some families fear their lines will weaken." They worry that without tradition forced, our blood will dilute. Kale leaned forward. Strength comes from willing hearts. Those who choose to celebrate will carry the right's power willingly. He glanced at Arya. I believe our people will follow if they know they decide. Arya nodded. Oriana shook her head. We need guarantees. Who will enforce these choices? Arya met Irina's gaze. The council will uphold consent. We introduce a consent seal, a simple pledge signed by candidate and family. Breaking it brings shame, not exile. She held Irina's eyes. We use honor, not force. Celis added, we can educate families on new rights. Teachers, healers, and diplomats will guide each candidate. They will understand the value of choice. Dasil tapped his chin. Education costs resources and time. Arya smiled. We have our people's support. They will volunteer to teach and to guide. They want this change. Outside the chamber, voices rose in muted debate. Arya sensed tension behind the walls. She wished she could calm every worried heart. She looked at Marlowe. He offered a small smile that steadied her. She felt his presence as a shield against doubt. The committee carried on through morning. They argued each clause. Arya and Celis spoke for families whose children had felt fear. Kale told of farmers who wanted to pass on traditions to willing heirs. Marlowe described how Marines on his world celebrated rights by choice and how their bonds grew stronger. By midday, they reached the article on public ceremonies. Irina insisted on strict limits. Arya proposed open festivals where every community could host a ceremony. Families could decorate shrines and share stories. Tradition lives in our stories, Arya said. Let us celebrate openly, some elders nodded. Others looked unsure. Dice ill stood. We must protect our customs. Too much change will erase us, Arya rose, voice clear. Change does not erase. Change reveals what matters most. Our people chose compassion, unity, wisdom, courage, and honor. These virtues will guide our new rights. She paused. We hold our past in our hearts, we carry it forward. A hush fell. Even Irina looked moved. At last, she spoke softly. I will stand with you, line-bearer, if the people agree. Arya's chest lifted. Marlowe squeezed her hand. The council chamber's light seemed warmer. They finished the draft by sundown. The final parchment held the new charter, sections on consent pledges, community ceremonies, education programs, honor seals, and family-led blessings. At its end, the words read, May each voice be heard, each heart be honored, and tradition guide but never bind. Arya traced the last line with her finger. They sealed the parchments in a glass tube. Kale carried it to the council's archive. Arya and Marlowe followed. Celis placed a hand on Arya's shoulder. You have done more than propose a charter, she said. You have given hope. Arya smiled, tears in her eyes. Outside, torchlit crowds waited. Word had spread of the draft. Families stood with children, elders, and neighbors. They held candles that glowed like stars. Arya and Marlowe stood on the steps of the archive. Arya unrolled the seal and spoke into the quiet night. We present our new charter for public debate. May every voice add its strength. The crowd cheered softly, candles rising. Arya looked at Marlowe. His dark eyes shone with pride. She felt her heart swell. This moment was born of trials and choices. It would shape a new tradition. In the torchlight, Arya raised her hand. Together, she said, we build tomorrow. The candles flared and voices joined her words. Marlowe stepped close, and Arya knew the future for Velaris had truly begun. Arya stood on the plaza steps as dawn painted the sky in soft pink and gold. Candles from last night's debate still flickered in the hands of early risers. The new charter awaited the final vote by the people of Velaris. Arya's heart beat steady with hope. Beside her, Captain Marlowe adjusted his uniform and offered her a kind smile. Families gathered in circles, reading the charter by torchlight and candles' glow. Elders spoke softly, explaining each section. Parents held their children close, pointing to the words, Each voice be heard, each heart be honored, they read. Arya saw nods of approval and earnest faces eager for change. Celis moved through the crowd. answering questions about the consent pledges and community ceremonies. She spoke gently, drawing on her years as Arya's tutor. People listened, relieved that tradition would live on with respect. Arya watched as Kale distributed copies of the charter to merchants and gardeners alike. Each parchment carried the promise of a new age. As the sun lifted above the city walls, a hush fell over the plaza. A council herald stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. Arya felt the temperature rise as all eyes turned to her. She took a breath and climbed the steps. Marlowe followed, his presence a quiet strength at her side. Arya raised her voice. "People of Velaris," she began. "Today we choose our future. This charter is not just words on paper. It is the promise of our choice, our honor, and our unity." She paused, seeing hopeful faces shining in the dawn. "We trust each family, each child, and each elder to decide what tradition means to them." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Arya continued, "When we pled? With our hearts, we create bonds of strength that no one can break. When we guide our children with education and consent, we build a people who cherish honor and compassion." She raised the charter above her head. "This is our gift to Velaris." The crowd broke into applause and cheers. Arya stepped down and approached a long bench where citizens placed their sealed votes. Each voter dipped a leaf into ink and pressed it onto the charter's parchment as a symbol of assent. Arya and Marlowe watched patiently as the line moved forward. Families offered silent thanks, and Arya returned each with a bowed head and a gentle smile. When the final leaf was pressed, Arya signaled the herald. The herald took the charter and walked to the steps of the archive, where a bronze bell hung. With a firm hand, he struck the bell 3 times. Its clear tone echoed across the plaza and through the silver gardens beyond. Each ring carried the weight of 1,000 voices. Arya felt tears in her eyes as the final echo faded. "The charter is accepted," the herald announced. "Velaris enters a new age." The plaza erupted in celebration. Trumpets sounded from the towers and bells tolled throughout the city. Arya found herself swept into a crowd that shouted and sang. She closed her eyes, savoring the unity that coursed like warmth through every heart. Marlowe guided Arya to the terrace overlooking the gardens. Ribbons and flowers decorated the railings. People danced beneath the silver trees. Arya watched a group of children chase glowing petals on the breeze. She recalled the trials that had tested her honor, courage, wisdom, compassion, and vision of change. Each step had led to this dawn of choice. "You did it," Marlowe said softly. Arya turned to him, eyes shining. "We did it," she corrected. Marlowe bowed his head briefly. "Yes. Together." Arya reached for his hand. She felt strength and comfort in his touch. Down below, Celis and Kale joined them. Celis embraced Arya. "You have given this world a gift," she said. Arya smiled. "No, you all gave me courage." Kale held the bronze bell striker. "Would you ring it for your people?" he asked. Arya nodded and took the striker. She climbed the steps and stood before the bell. The crowd hushed in respect. Arya lifted the striker and let it fall. The bell rang once, clear and bright. Her voice rose above the tone. "May our hearts guide our choices, and may our traditions shine with freedom." The bell rang twice more, each note a promise. As the last sound faded, Arya stepped down and walked through the cheering crowd. People pressed gifts of flowers, fruit, and woven charms into her hands. She accepted each with a humble bow. Children ran up, offering petals and smiles. Arya gathered them in her arms, laughter light in the morning air. Afternoon came with a feast in the gardens. Tables of silver wood held fruits from distant stars, breads of golden grain, and sweet cakes shimmering with honey. Marlowe sat beside Arya as they shared food with Celis, Kale, and the faction leaders. Toasts rang out for honor and choice. Arya drank the sweet wine and felt its warmth spread. In a quiet moment, Arya rose and raised her goblet. "To Velaris," she said, voice clear and strong. "To the strength in our traditions and the freedom in our hearts." The crowd echoed her toast. Marlowe lifted his glass to her smile. Arya met his gaze and saw the promise of new voyages and new bonds. As the Sun set behind the twin moons. Lanterns lit the gardens in soft silver light. Arya and Marlowe walked along a path lined with vines. Arya paused and touched a leaf that glowed faintly. She whispered, "We have begun," Marlowe nodded, "and there is much more ahead." Arya looked to the horizon, her heart full of hope. The gentle night, Velaris dreamed of its new era. Arya, the youngest linebearer, had become a leader of change. By her side stood Marlowe, the envoy who had become her friend and ally. Together, they walked into a future where choice and tradition would guide every step.